speaking out against gun violence on the streets of Boston.
Systems have scared people tremendously to even try to be revolutionary.
Following the steps of Dr. Martin Luther King, using prayer and protest to impact government.
The capital we do need, but the care is just as important. It's our time.
Making workplaces more inclusive.
Ultimately, I started to wonder about our hiring process. Are we doing this the right way?
Millennials are using the latest in technology and social movement strategies to change the nation and their communities.
Giving a new meaning to what it means to be an African American in society today.
Celebrating Boston's Black history, inspiring our future. Here now, Boston 25 News reporter Crystal Haynes.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. This year, in our special Black History Month series, Boston's Black History, Inspiring Our Future, we're highlighting 4 millennials on the front lines of what some call the new civil rights movement. Inspired by those who came before them, they're tackling issues affecting underserved communities and getting results their own way. And we begin with Reverend Willie Bodrick II. I sat down with the 31-year-old pastor and organizer to hear how he's following Dr. King's legacy and serving as a leader in state and local government.
Come, let us adore him. Kneel down before him. Captain of the football team, captain of the baseball team, active in chorus. I mean, I was a very interesting kid because I never really liked boundaries, and my parents didn't allow boundaries to be placed on me or my brothers.
Reverend Willie Bodrick II was a busy kid. The oldest of 3, his mom was an educator. His father was a pastor in their Southeast Georgia community. Everywhere he turned, he had role models.
I really love the fact that I come from a people and a legacy who have been through ups, downs, mountains and molehills, and have never given up. Gave so much so that I might have the opportunities that I have.
God, we ask that you be in our midst.
When Bodrick entered Harvard Divinity School in 2011, he was inspired to do more.
In the midst of that time, there were so many things happening. Jena 6 and, Osama bin Laden, all these big things happening. A black man running for president, and I wasn't even 21 yet. And
young people his age were mobilizing across the country, speaking out against police shootings, inequities in the judicial system, and institutional racism.
Oh, we worship.
Bodrick secured an internship and later the associate pastor position at the historic 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury, the same place where Dr. Martin Luther King preached.
We need to think critically about what's happening where our young people. We need to do something about strengthening our education system. We need to do something about poverty and food deserts in our neighborhoods. We need to do the work to make sure that we're supporting people and really addressing unemployment in this community and saying, look, we need to create atmospheres where business development can grow in a healthy way, but it doesn't gentrify and push people out of their own neighborhoods. We need to really take seriously this community and the people in this community.
Bodrick's community work led him to politics and Attorney General Maura Healey's office. He focused his activism to ministering to young people affected by gun violence.
God, we need you right now, God.
Joining Boston police-led peace walks as one of the youngest members of their community task force. In the days after the shooting death of Trayvon Martin and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, Bodrick joined faith leaders to address racial tension in the city and mobilize young people through programming, peaceful protest, and prayer. Bodrick serves on the board of advisors of the Roxbury YMCA and as the chairperson of the Boston Network for Black Student Achievement.
We're doing things in a different way. That means we're going to look at the world in a different way. There are many, I would suggest, of people who I think are continuing to perpetuate ideals that are past their time. And you're seeing through various movements throughout the last few years.
And Reverend Bodrick is now serving on Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins' transition team. Now, while Bodrick is mobilizing youth to combat violence in their communities, Melissa James is working to make sure there's diversity in their workplace. This is her story from Google dropout to tech company CEO.
Melissa James grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Milton to immigrant parents. She was the first in her family to go to college.
They just knew that doctors, lawyers, and engineers and nurses ended up making a lot of money. I didn't like blood, and I didn't like math. So I ended up deciding that perhaps those fields weren't for me. I then focused on going into law.
But the thought of graduating during the recession with a large amount of law school debt sent James stumbling into tech instead, landing a position at startup Sample 6. And the company took a chance on her.
I remember my first day at Sample 6. He handed me an unlimited Amex and keys to the office and literally said, "Don't burn it down." And here I was at 21 years old going, what the heck?
James says she flourished at the small company, but when she leveled up to Google in their diversity and inclusion office, her dreams crashed. She says the hiring process there was focused more on Ivy League recruits rather than diversity.
Ultimately, I started to wonder about our hiring process. Are we doing this the right way?
Google reported only 2.5% of its U.S. employees are Black, 3.6% Latinx. Just 30% are women.
And I think it's just really important that when we say we want diversity of thought, we need to be thoughtful about how do we engage those other components of diversity as we go through the hiring process.
James decided to fix that, and Tech Connection was born. Using her own personal experience and inspired by other entrepreneurs of color, she developed a hiring process that puts the emphasis on relevant experience and the in-person interview to connect companies to diverse tech employees.
I think our millennials are asking us to think differently. They're asking bold questions. They're expecting innovative solutions, and they won't stop until they get it. And I think it's long overdue.
According to a National Urban League report, companies like Uber, Twitter, and Facebook have fewer than 3% of tech workers identify as Black. Tech Connection has now placed dozens of diverse candidates since its founding, and James credits her ability to apply a fresh outlook to an old problem: lack of diversity in STEM.
We're no longer just tolerating the things that we see. And what I see is that people are saying, like, no, I want to be in charge of my career. I want to be happy in what I do. I want work-life balance and what it means for me. And I'm willing to get it at any means possible.
All right, well, coming up, I will sit down with a Boston entrepreneur who's helping women of color break through the glass ceiling.
The moment that I started sharing my story with other women and realizing that I wasn't alone,
how she used her experience fighting institutional racism in the workplace to make a big impact. And later, he survived gang violence and narrowly avoided incarceration. Using his story, he's fighting to end gun violence in communities of color. How this millennial is celebrating Boston's Black history and inspiring our future. But first, a look at Boston 25's month-long education campaign with Boston Public Schools.
Boston's Black history
is everyone's history.
Dr. George Franklin Grant was a true innovator.
He became Harvard's first Black professor in 1871.
His expertise was in mechanical dentistry. Dr. Grant invented a treatment for cleft palate.
When he wasn't seeing patients, he liked to play golf, which inspired another invention. Dr. Grant patented the first modern golf tee.
Boston 25 News
and Boston Public Schools
celebrating Black History Month.
Welcome back to this Boston 25 News in-depth special celebrating Boston's Black history, inspiring our future. You know, recent data shows that women of color make up just 5% of executive or senior level positions at the S&P 500 companies. I had the chance to spend time with entrepreneur Lori Nicholas. Now, she's created a very unique networking platform for millennial women and is helping them connect to each other and break the glass ceiling.
I wanted to be a pediatrician and I wanted to have a red car. Like, that was it. That's all I wanted to do.
Entrepreneur Lori Nicholas found herself in the medical field, instead running a prestigious doctor's office. But her pride in her work was overshadowed by how she says she was treated.
As a young Black woman in a leadership role, it was a very isolated experience for me. I did face a lot of adversity in the workplace, which I struggled to navigate personally.
Nicholas tells me the institutional racism and sexism she faced was shocking and unexpected. The oldest of 5, she grew up in Cambridge, a place she calls a melting pot of cultures.
Absolutely. I was absolutely surprised because, again, I grew up in Cambridge where it was diverse. I had never experienced anything of that nature. So I was surprised.
And Nicholas had graduated with honors from UMass Boston and later Harvard's Extension School and Northeastern University School of Law. She wanted to make it work.
No one in the entire organization looked like me. So there was no one that I could go and speak to that would understand where I was coming from and that would understand what I was going through.
With encouragement from friends and mentors, she left the office and started her own business. Pink Fit is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the importance of women's health and wellness by offering physical fitness programs, sport programs, and wellness workshops. They're best known for their Pink Sundays, a female-only football league.
The moment that I started sharing my story with other women and realizing that I wasn't alone.
Out of that, she started FemCove, a female-focused organization that provides a platform for millennial women to connect, collaborate, and create with other women. Monthly, women share their own experiences. And Nicholas continues to be inspired by women-centric movements like the Women's March, Me Too, and the election of a historic number of women to the House of Representatives.
You know, giving a new meaning to what it means to be an African American in society today. Diversity and inclusion, it's such a buzzword nowadays, and a lot of organizations are not putting forth the effort to build an inclusive workplace, a workplace with a collaborative culture.
And FemCove uses its online platform to provide a number of resources on everything from work-life balance to Black women and postpartum depression. Boston 25 News also partnered with Boston Public Schools this year as the media sponsor for the 37th annual MLK celebration at the Strand Theater in Dorchester. Schools and students were selected to participate, and their performances range from dance and spoken word to a video produced by students. The performances weaved in themes that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, including nonviolence, justice, and equality. Now, if you missed this performance, you can catch a recording of it at boston25news.com/MLK. Well, he's fighting to end gun violence in communities of color.
I am not afraid to challenge systems. I am not afraid to challenge social norms. I hate social norms.
How James Mackey is inspiring others with his story of survival. And now another look at Boston 25's education campaign with Boston Public Schools celebrating Black History Month.
Boston's Black history
is everyone's history.
Long before slavery was abolished in 1783, a young Boston girl made a landmark achievement.
Phyllis Wheatley published her first poem at 13 and was the first African American to publish a book.
She endured painful hardships but found personal freedom in her poetry.
A permanent memorial of Wheatley inspires girls to believe in what they can become and what they can do.
Boston 25 News
and Boston Public Schools
celebrating Black History Month.
Welcome back to this Black History Month special. The number of teen homicides doubled in Boston in 2017 and held steady again last year. I had the chance to meet with James Mackey, who is using his story of surviving gang violence and narrowly avoiding incarceration to fight for an end to gun violence in communities of color.
Systems have scared people tremendously to even try to be revolutionary. I am not afraid to challenge systems.
Community organizer James Mackey is not afraid to challenge the system that he says failed him when he was very young.
And back in the mid-'80s to the early '90s when the crack epidemic hit, my father had got incarcerated because he was trying to provide for my mom and for my older brother, sister, and me while I was in my mom's stomach.
Mackey's mother raised the family alone on the south side of Chicago. He says when he was just a teenager, his brother suffered a broken neck and gang violence. His mother moved the family to Columbus, Ohio to escape.
The way that society, the way that the media portrays Black men is nothing but negative. They're angry, vicious, and a whole bunch of other things. And so me seeing that as a 6-year-old, not really understanding it, but internalizing that, I became that. So I was kicked out of every public school system that I ever attended.
He says it wasn't until one of his brothers was shot that he decided to make a change.
I felt like it was my fault because of the lifestyle that I was living that led him down to that path. And then I had lost a stepbrother due to gang violence. And I also felt like, you know, my actions played a major role in that.
A teacher took a chance on Mackey and helped him get into the AmeriCorps program with a placement in Boston.
They believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
Mackey found his stride as a motivational speaker, using his story to inspire others and using his connections in his neighborhood to organize young people around issues of gun violence. He recalls being invited to the State House for a discussion with lawmakers on prison reform.
Everyone on the panel was white, and the whole room was white except for Rasan Hall from ACLU. And that made me extremely upset because I'm like, most of the young people in Massachusetts who are incarcerated are black and brown young people. But
Mackey has collaborated with the Center for Teen Empowerment and worked with national nonprofit Youth Build and Boston's My Brother's Keeper. He started Stuck on Replay, a series of community events to talk about issues affecting communities of color.
We can do something about it, or we can remain stuck on replay and continue to be, you know, criminalized and hurt by numerous systems that have oppressed black and brown people.
Mackey recently received the Roy Wilkins Next Generation Leadership Award by the Boston NAACP.
And a lot of millennials, I would definitely say, are revolutionary and are not backing down. And we got a lot of energy, we got a lot of passion. You have social media now where you can be a social media guru and start movements just with a hashtag.
Now, Mackey is currently working with a group of 300 men from neighborhood groups to respond to violence in the city of Boston. You know, we know that millennials are leading national civil rights movements, but they're not alone.
As corny as it may sound, like, we really are the future.
Up next, Generation Z, yes, teenagers are making their voices heard and fighting for equity in their communities. But first, let's share another clip from Boston 25's education campaign in collaboration with Boston Public Schools.
Boston's Black history
is everyone's history.
Melnia Cass, you probably know the name for the boulevard in Boston.
But this civil rights activist is a legend in Roxbury.
She organized voting drives for women, launched kindergarten programs, and held sit-ins to protest segregation.
Cass spent decades improving life for African Americans in her community, always believing small steps could lead to great change.
Boston 25 News
and Boston Public Schools,
celebrating Black History Month. Boston's Black history
is everyone's history.
Boston, it's where he went to grad school, met his wife, and decided to become a civil rights leader.
We're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who earned his doctorate from BU.
Following the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, Dr. King returned to Boston,
leading the first ever civil rights protest held in the Northeast.
Boston 25 News
and Boston Public Schools,
celebrating Black History Month.
Thanks for staying with us for this Black History Month in-depth special. You know, we've been profiling millennials all month, but Generation Z, those are teenagers, by the way, they're leading major national movements around civil rights. I sat down with young community activists Carrie Mays, Debbie Perez, and Ratule Diallo to hear how they're using technology and social movement strategies to push for change. Why do you think young people, when we're talking about young people who are initiating these large movements, these marches, these community programs, why do you think that young people want to be engaged in their community and to affect change?
Recently, I've been seeing much more youth stepping up and using their voice and the power that they have.
Youth are the leaders of today, and it's because racism has evolved that this movement in this youth generation has evolved.
What do you see as the biggest issues facing young people of color today?
Racism, white supremacy.
How do we change it?
I feel like the way to change is honestly to educate and believe.
What skills do young people bring to this fight that maybe other generations don't?
I feel like one advantage that we have is the power of social media. Like before, this stuff is nothing new. This has always been happening, all the terrorist attacks, the police brutality. But I feel like now with social media, we have the power to record this happening live and force a conversation about it.
Do you think you're able to reach more people because of the skills you have? I mean, you can use social media in a different way. You're more creative. You have different ways of thinking about things.
I definitely do agree, and I also think that the way in which youth can drive that conversation, we have talent, we have art, we have ambition, and not only that, but we have time because we're young.
All right, well, thank you for joining us for this very special presentation of Boston's Black History, Millennials Inspiring Our Future. A very special thank you to Boston Public Schools and the students in our month-long Black History Month education program. Continue these conversations. Go to our website at boston25news.com/Black History Month. Thank you.